It's July 30th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with Day 3 of the 2024 Paris Olympics. South Korea won its third consecutive gold medal in the men's archery team event in Paris on Monday. And on the same day, 16-year-old shooter Pan Hyo-jin claimed the gold medal in the women's 10-meter air rifle, making her South Korea's youngest Summer Olympics gold medalist. What would be North Korea's seventh nuclear test may come around the time of the U.S. election in November, South Korea's defense chief says. He stressed security cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo will remain solid, whoever comes into power in the U.S. The French government is investigating after multiple telecommunications lines were hit by acts of vandalism, disrupting some fixed and mobile services in 6 areas of France. The host city of the Olympic Games, Paris, wasn't affected. Team Korea continued its Olympic success on Monday, winning 2 gold medals and a silver. The gold medal in the women's air rifle marked Korea's 100th Olympic gold in history, while the men's archery team is bringing home their 3rd straight gold medal at the Summer Games. Our Lee Seung-ja has more.
Following the South Korean women's archery team's finish at the top of the podium the day before, the men's team on Monday also won gold, marking their 3rd straight gold medal finish at an Olympic Games. The trio of Kim Woo-jin, Kim Jae-duk, and Lee Woo-seok did so against a hostile crowd as they faced off against the French. Up 3-1, the trio finished off the game in the best way possible, with all 3 shooting perfect 10s in the final set to win 5-1. With the women's team having secured gold at the 10th Olympics in a row, the men's team will try to continue a streak of their own. They also won South Korea's 101st Olympic gold medal. This means the country's 100th gold medal in history came earlier in the day when Pan Hyo-jin pulled off a major surprise to win the women's air rifle gold. The 16-year-old, who only began the sport 3 years ago, failed to capitalize on a rather comfortable lead. Pan would go into a shoot-off against Hwang Yu-ting of China, winning the nail-biter 10.4 to 10.3 to win the top podium finish. Not only did the teen win the country's 100th Olympic gold medal in history, she also became South Korea's youngest shooting medalist ever. And it doesn't always have to be a top podium finish to be a memorable moment, as Ha Mi-mi on Monday secured a silver medal in the women's under 57-kilogram judo competition. A descendant of a Korean independence fighter and born to a Korean father and a Japanese mother, Ha decided to compete under the South Korean flag in Paris. However, after receiving her 3rd penalty warning during sudden death, Ha lost to Canada's Krista Deguchi. Still, she became the 2nd best female judoka in the world in her weight category and carried on her grandmother's wish of representing South Korea. Despite setting a goal of 5 gold medals in this year's Olympic Games, South Korea has already won 5, along with 3 silver and 1 bronze. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
As the U.S. presidential election draws near, North Korea is aligned for possible provocations to raise its profile. This was said in a recent interview with South Korea's top defense chief as he visited Japan for a trilateral security meeting with Washington and Tokyo. Our Moon Hae-yeon has the details.
North Korea may be planning a nuclear test near the time of the presidential election in the United States, according to South Korea's defense minister in a recent interview. On Monday, Bloomberg published its interview with the Minister of National Defense, Shin Won-sik, during his visit to Tokyo for a trilateral security cooperation meeting with South Korea, the US, and Japan, as well as discussing the deal between the 3 countries to standardize the tracking of North Korean missiles and other gains in security cooperation. He stated that Pyongyang has completed preparations for a nuclear test. With North Korea's provocations often aligning with major political events, he said that it could coincide with the US presidential election to raise its leverage against Washington. Despite past summits between Kim Jong-un and former US President Donald Trump, the regime has been critical of the Biden administration and ignored calls to resume denuclearization talks. The current Republican candidate has frequently mentioned Kim in recent campaign speeches, suggesting that he will improve relations if he wins re-election. However, Pyongyang state-run news agency stated that North Korea does not care which administration takes office in the US. The last nuclear test by North Korea was in 2017, and the country is estimated to have 80 to 90 warheads, with ambitions to increase that number. Defense Minister Shin also said that South Korea, the US, and Japan have enhanced real-time data sharing on missile launches since December, with standard operating procedures almost finalized. Additionally, Shin highlighted North Korea's military cooperation with Russia, which includes arms transfers of 12,000 containers in total to support Russia's efforts in Ukraine. Shin's visit to Japan marks the first by a South Korean defense minister in 15 years, reflecting improved relations and enhanced security cooperation under President Yoon Suk-yeol. He emphasized that both countries benefit from this strengthened partnership against shared threats. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Now, what might the North do a nuclear test around the time of the U.S. presidential election in November? What's on the North's mind, and how closely is the regime following events over in the States? For more, we're joined by Dr. Bruce Klinger. Great to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
So, South Korea is not ruling out the possibility of North Korea staging a nuclear test before or after the November election in the U.S. What's your take on this possibility?
Well, some have asserted that North Korea always does something very provocative, such as an ICBM or nuclear test, before a U.S. or South Korean election. That is, except when they don't. And I don't think if they did a nuclear test, it would really have an influence on the voting in the U.S. election. The voters for the two sides are pretty much determined, and I don't think anything that North Korea does will actually sway people's votes to or from either one of the candidates. South Korea, whether Defense Minister Shin's comments were based on intelligence information or not, 2.5 years ago, both Washington and Seoul said that a seventh nuclear test was imminent based on indications they had seen, and obviously that never occurred. So, as is often the case with North Korea, we'll just have to wait and see. But I don't think even a nuclear test would have an effect on the U.S. election.
And we do have two contenders in the U.S. election, former U.S. President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Some experts say dealing with North Korea and Korean Peninsula issues will not be Trump's priority when it comes to his foreign policies. Is that so?
I think President Trump, really like any new president, will want to focus on domestic issues, particularly the economy. That said, the outside world intrudes and wants to be taken care of. But I think President Trump's priorities would likely be China, Taiwan, Ukraine, and then also the Middle East. So I don't think he would be rushing to re-engage with Kim Jong-un. And Kim may not want to re-engage because he's not needing benefits as badly as he did back in 2018, given the growing support and the strengthening relations with Moscow. That said, North Korea may see an opportunity to gain benefits or concessions from President Trump. The message in response to President Trump's comments about Kim was both candidates are representing a hostile policy. If the U.S. wanted to talk, they would have to do things such as canceling military exercises, stopping the rotational deployment of U.S. strategic assets, both of which Trump did in 2018. So perhaps he could be induced by North Korea to re-engage, but I think his priorities would be elsewhere.
Well, does that mean we shouldn't expect another Trump-Kim Jong-un summit like we saw back in 2018?
Well, we didn't really predict the two that happened back in 2018, 2019.
That's true.
But I think Trump would be more likely to focus elsewhere. And I think really North Korea would be the driver for whether U.S.-North Korean relations get back on track.
Well, I'm sure North Korea must be closely following the U.S. presidential election, as we all are. Now, do you think Kim Jong-un wants Trump to win or Harris? What do you think?
Well, the North Korean statement after the Republican National Convention showed no interest in leaning one way or the other. They said both represented the U.S. hostile policy, and that after the last summit in Hanoi, North Korea said they want no more to do with the United States. That said, if you read between the lines of that message, they may see that if President Trump was willing to cancel exercises and the rotational deployment of nuclear-capable assets, then they may be willing to have another summit, and then they might dangle an offering of, if we sign a peace treaty, that could lead to a Nobel Peace Prize. It's something that has never been achieved in the 70 years, which might induce Trump back to the negotiating room. So we're certainly far from certain, but I think we'd have to look more at the messaging by North Korea to see what they would be willing to do in return for any resumption of talks.
And what's widely believed is that Harris's foreign policies, including her take on dealing with North Korea issues, will not differ too much from Biden's. Do you think Harris will actually inherit Biden's North Korea policies?
I think she would. She doesn't have the foreign policy experience that President Biden had, really 50 years of experience working foreign relations in the Congress and then the White House. So she, I think, will be leaning more on advisors within her inner circle, within the government. And I don't think she would want to stray very far from President Biden's policies since she served in that administration. So I think it would be largely a continuation of President Biden's policies, at least with regard to the alliances in Northeast Asia, as well as the approach to North Korea. And the U.S. continues to try to have outreach and any kind of diplomatic engagement, but Pyongyang is the one that keeps rejecting repeated attempts by both Washington and Seoul for any kind of dialogue.
But the South Korea-U.S. alliance will remain solid regardless of who comes into power, many experts believe. Dr. Klinger, are you also on the same page?
Well, the alliance has gone through thick and thin over 7 decades. There have been times when there was a great deal of strains in the alliance, given very divergent policies between Washington and Seoul with different administrations. There were strains during the Moon Jae-in administration, but now President Yoon has policies that are much more in favor of the alliance, as well as outreach to Japan and strengthening trilateral relations, as we saw with this weekend's agreement. So I think the basis for the alliance is very, very strong, as long as neither side does policies that are very divergent from the other's priorities, or works to reverse the progress we've made in recent years on strengthening deterrence and defense capabilities of the alliance, as well as trilaterally with Japan.
All right, Dr. Klinger, thank you for connecting with us this morning. You enjoy your evening there.
Thank you very much.
Consumer Reports in the U.S. has named its best electric vehicles of 2024, with evaluations of around 50 EVs released in the American market so far. While the BMW iX received the highest score of 84, South Korea's Genesis GV60 ranked second with 75 points. However, in the mainstream EV category, Hyundai's Ioniq 6 received the highest score of 83, with the report praising its excellent interior quietness, smooth and quick acceleration, along with a fast direct charging. Now, in the same category, Kia's Niro EV ranked second with 71 points. Meanwhile, in the three-row SUV category, the Kia EV9 received the highest score with 78 points. South Korea's population in the 2023 turned around to report an increase. Now, an influx of foreign residents backed the figure, while the number of local citizens still continue to fall. Park Gon-woo has the details.
The population in South Korea is up for the first time in 3 years. due to a rise in the number of foreign residents. According to Statistics Korea's 2023 census released on Monday, the total population is around 51.7 million, up 0.2% from the previous year. The total population had been seeing on-year decreases since 2021. The number of foreign nationals who've lived in the country for at least 3 months or entered the country for the purpose of staying that long jumped by over 10% on year at more than 1.9 million people. Chinese and Vietnamese nationals accounted for over half of the total. Statistics Korea says that more foreigners coming to Korea after the pandemic and the expansion of the employment permit system are major factors behind the rise. It also said the number of multinational families, including households with naturalized Korean citizens or foreigners who got married to Korean citizens, saw an increase of more than 4% on year. And that's a jump of over 24% compared to 2018. At the same time, the agency's data shows continuous falls in the population of South Korean citizens living in the country since 2021. The number shrank to below the 50 million people mark for the first time in 4 years in 2022. But that fell by more than 100,000 last year. In detail, the working age population, or those aged 15 to 64, shrank by around 140,000 on year, while those aged 14 or under also decreased by over 240,000. Due to the country's aging society, the number of people aged 65 or older saw an increase of more than 460,000, making a total of nearly 10 million. That led the median age of the country to rise to 45.7, up 0.6 from the year before. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
The first public robot facility has opened here in Seoul City. Now, hopes are high that such an introduction will back smaller firms and related industries to thrive and take a leading role in global robotics. Our Lee Soo-jin has this report.
We live in a day and age where humans are focused on building robots that can tackle labor shortages across different industries. And with the opening of this new research facility in Seoul's Gangnam-gu district, research institutions and companies alike will now be able to test and certify their robots as Seoul's first public robot research facility.
It has been difficult for AI startup employees to travel all the way to Changwon or Incheon to carry out tests, but now they can do that here in Gangnam. I believe that this will boost the competitiveness of the manufacturing sector as a whole.
Businesses that are the backbone of the manufacturing sector, such as metal and car part manufacturing companies, have been losing steam due to their heavy reliance on skilled artisans, as many have begun to retire with no new workers to replace them. To assist these businesses, artificial intelligence is being used to train Meister robots to learn the skills of these artisans. This machine, for example, that was used by a skilled artisan for decades, has been transformed into a Meister robot that can do what the artisan did all by itself, based on data that was collected for 2 years. Even though the artisan is now retired, his knowledge of how much pressure must be applied to the polished rod can still be used. And research on cobots is also being actively carried out. Cobots enhance productivity by taking on repetitive tasks of sorting out different pieces of equipment into certain shapes and colors, thereby freeing up humans to carry out more complex tasks. But because cobots work in the same space as people, they are required to have safety certifications that were previously unable to be obtained domestically.
The very first cobot certification system is now available. Before we had to pay a fee. That was usually quite large. To a foreign company to get certified, but we can now certify our cobots in Korea.
The district office expects this to further enhance research on cobots in the country. Continued support for robot development like this from the public sector will not only help smaller companies and manufacturing industries as a whole, but also help move Seoul closer to becoming a global hub for robotics. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Si-young, and this is The World Now. Vandals sabotaged France's telecoms networks in 6 areas of the country overnight from Sunday into Monday, but only minimum disruptions were caused. This follows last Friday's sabotage attack on railway lines leading into Paris, and the French government says it suspects the ultra-left extremists to be responsible. French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin said on Monday that the authorities have identified a certain number of profiles and that the attacks were the traditional mode of operation of the ultra-left. Nicolas Chatin, spokesman for SFR, one of France's 4 biggest telecom operators, said that it's vandalism and that large sections of cables were cut, which would need an axe or a grinder. With the French government vigilant over threats to the Paris Olympic Games, French authorities arrested an activist from an ultra-left movement on Sunday at one of the grounds of national rail operators SNCF. Following Nicolas Maduro's re-election in Venezuela on Sunday, Panama has put its official diplomatic relations with Venezuela on hold, demanding to see a full review of the vote count procedures before relations are normalized. Panama's President José Raúl Mulino said on Monday that the Foreign Ministry will also withdraw its diplomatic personnel from Venezuela. Meanwhile, in a joint statement, 9 Latin American countries are calling for an emergency meeting of the Organization of American States Permanent Council to discuss the Venezuelan election. In the statement, Argentina, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Guatemala, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, and Uruguay expressed profound concern over Sunday's election. Argentina's President Javier Milei posted on his social media saying the, quote, fraud that the dictator Nicolas Maduro has carried out and perpetrated is nothing more or less than a Pyrrhic victory. Nicolas Maduro, who has ruled Venezuela for a quarter century, claims to have won 51% of the vote on Sunday, while independent exit polls showed big opposition win. Moving over to the United Kingdom, 2 children have been killed and 9 injured, 6 of whom are in critical condition in a knife attack at a children's dance workshop. The local police said that 2 adults who were trying to protect the children are also in a critical condition after being stabbed. The stabbings happened at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class event in Southport, a town in northwest England. Merseyside police have said that a 17-year-old male from Banks, Lancashire, has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. At a news conference, the local police chief said officers at the scene were shocked to see many children subjected to a ferocious attack. Polish divers have found a 19th century shipwreck laden with bottles of champagne off the coast of Sweden, around 60 meters below the surface of the Baltic Sea. What they say is very exclusive cargo is suspected to have been en route for delivery to the Tsar of Russia before the vessel sank. Marek Tsatsai from the Baltic Tech Diving Group said that almost all of the ship is still there and that they only noticed the champagne bottles at a later stage. While the cargo included porcelain and bottles of mineral water, the diver said they would need the permission from the Swedish authorities before bringing the load to the shore.
Good morning. Intense summer heat continues to bake Korea day and night. Southern and eastern regions especially are having unbearable heat, with heat wave warnings in place and highs hovering around 35 degrees Celsius. The central regions will notice highs going up to 4 degrees higher this afternoon, but still not too bad considering it's late July. Cloudy skies are in store again for the northern regions, and there could be on and off rain of 5 to 20 millimeters to the east of Gyeonggi-do and mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province during the day today. Meanwhile, the rest of the country will be under blazing sunshine with very strong UV rays in the afternoon. Sun safety is a must when heading outdoors. Drink plenty of water and take care. Checking on today's highs now, Seoul gets up to 31 degrees, Daegu, Gyeongju at 36 degrees Celsius. Then it's forecast to rain in the capital area in Gangwon-do province on Friday. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.